Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Every Day is Saturday. I'm Matt Stahl, along with my partner, Brad Gatto. And where's your greeting?
I literally, as you were saying that, I was like, well, what am I going to say? I got to say something different this time just to catch him off guard. And then I said nothing,
Which
really caught you off guard. Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Matthew
all right.
Roy Stahl.
There we go. Bradley Joseph Gatto.
Okay. Well, now it's all out there.
We're even.
Now it's all out there.
All right. Today, we are picking up where we left off with a review of The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. We've been doing a continuous book review here. So we're picking up on chapter 9. Before we get into that, what else have you been up to?
It's summertime in Minnesota as we record this, and we're just getting to the end of baseball season. So it's been a lot of baseball, which is super fun. The cars are full of baseball dust everywhere. But last game's actually tonight for summer baseball. So a little bit of baseball, a little bit of work. I got addicted to a new show on Netflix.
What's that?
Suits.
Oh, the old one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Great show.
I didn't know it existed.
Really? I watched it way back in the day.
But it's now on Netflix.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow. How many seasons do they have? Do you know?
7.
Okay.
This is how dumb I am when it comes to some of the social stuff. When, what's his name? Prince Harry married Meghan Markle.
Yeah.
Isn't that who married her?
I think so. That sounds right.
One of the
you're
royals.
asking
one of the royals married her. And everybody's making a big deal out of it. I was like, who in the world is Meghan Markle? Like, why is this such a big... I've never seen her before in my life.
Series?
Yeah. She's Mike Ross's girlfriend / wife.
Wow. Okay.
So
it's all coming back to me now.
Yeah, I had an epiphany when I started watching.
I just had an epiphany right now. Like, that's crazy. I did not know that.
This is why everybody knew who Meghan Markle was.
Yeah, crazy.
And I thought it was a new show. And then the first person I told that I was watching, they're like, "Oh, that old show?" I was like, "What do you mean old? Just came to Netflix."
Isn't it like from 2003 or something?
I don't know. It's old. So there you go. There's my answer. How about you?
Similar soccer. All the soccer all over the place. Lots and lots of that. We actually just wrapped up our end of the season last week. So
same thing.
We have tryouts tonight for the fall.
Big break. Huge break there. It's a broken record with you and I. It's the same stuff all the time.
Different sport, same thing.
But we get to do something fun today. We get to jump into one of our favorite books. If you have not been around, we're actually, and I'll let you lead this off, but before we get into it specifically, we're on chapter 9. There's 20 chapters in this book. If you've not listened to every episode, it's fine. They all stand on their own really, really well. But the crux of this book, called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, the subtitle is Timeless Lessons on Wealth, Greed, and Happiness. Every chapter kind of has its own lesson. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, well, shoot, I haven't heard anything about the first 8 chapters, don't worry about it. All these lessons kind of stand on their own. But from time to time, not every episode, we just pick one of the we're going sequentially. We go through one of the chapters on an episode and kind of talk about it. And so that's what we're going to do today.
Maybe we should start jumping around, keep everyone confused.
Yeah. They do play on each other a little bit. So I would equate it to like a Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Like you can just pick up and watch an episode of Seinfeld and it's funny on its own. But if you do watch them sequentially, it's even funnier because there's some inside jokes you're going to miss out on.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way this is.
Same entertainment factor.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, we make it that entertaining. All right. Oh, what are you up to, baseball? What are you up to, soccer? Next episode. What are you up to, baseball? Yeah, we're super entertaining.
Each of us is going to have to come up.
Stumped him.
Each of us is going to have to come up with a really interesting hobby and just catch the other one off.
Something. Like making sauerkraut. Like you told me a long time ago you wanted to learn how to make sauerkraut.
Now I want to go base jumping instead.
It's like a non sequitur. They have nothing to do with it. You can still learn to make sauerkraut. It's not like you're like, well, I can't do that anymore. I have to base jump now. Why did you give up your dream of making sauerkraut? Because I got into base jumping. All right, we derailed.
Right, chapter 9.
I said this was going to be a short episode.
Chapter 9, Wealth is What You Don't See. Subtitle, Spending Money to Show People How Much Money You Have is the Fastest Way to Have Less Money.
For emphasis, one more time. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money.
All right. So he starts us off in the beginning by saying he makes a really great distinguishing language as we get further into here, I think. But talking about wealth to set the stage is wealth is what you don't see. And so Morgan opens the chapter talking about his days as a valet in Los Angeles in the heyday of
Which that would be a fun job.
material appearance. Yeah, no kidding.
I was at a restaurant last night that has valet, and there was like this little kid at the valet that was probably like 11, 12, 13 years old, and just drooling over some of these cars in Wayzata that were coming into this restaurant. They were getting valeted, and he's like, "Oh man, this is what I want to do when I grow up." Anyway,
he goes on to talk about that experience, and he gives a character a name of Roger. So he describes Roger, and Roger drove a fancy car. He drove a Porsche, and one day Roger showed up driving a Honda instead of a Porsche.
Nothing wrong with Hondas.
Nothing wrong. I've driven several Hondas.
Mm-hmm. Makes two of us.
I've not driven several Porsches.
Also makes two of us.
Yeah. One day Roger did show up in a Honda, and he finally asked him, "Hey, Roger, what happened to your Porsche?" It turns out that it had been repossessed. And the way he described the story is Roger kind of just nonchalantly explained that with zero shame. And so Morgan talks about how that kind of first sunk into him that, someone who drives $100,000 car may appear to be wealthy, but they likely or possibly are not. And
maybe they're just rich.
Right.
And so we'll get into kind of the difference between what it means to be rich and be wealthy. But he says in here, I'm just going to read exactly word for word. It says, "But the only data point you have about their wealth is that they have $100,000 less than they did before they bought the car, or $100,000 more in debt. That's all you know about them."
I like the parentheses.
Yes, exactly. And he says we tend to judge wealth by what we see, but that's the information we have in front of us, is just the physical things that person has, whether it's like the car in this instance, it's a house, it's some other number of toys that somebody may have, their watch, tire, watch. The watch is one of the most interesting ones to me.
It is
that a piece of jewelry essentially that you wear in your wrist, and some people are really, really into watches.
They are.
I have a buddy that sells watches in New York, and
he told me stories
like hundreds of thousands of dollars for just a watch.
A time.
It's not even a smart watch. It just tells time.
Sometimes it doesn't even do that.
It's a dumb watch. Oh, anyway,
it's crazy. So he talks about this being the one data point is what we can see in front of us. So our mind can kind of tend to trick us to draw conclusions. And so he talks about an example of how I didn't know that Rihanna had sued her financial advisor.
I didn't know that either before I read this book.
So he goes on to talk about how Rihanna, the famous singer, nearly went bankrupt and actually tried to sue her financial advisor because he didn't tell her that she could run out of money.
His response was pretty good. I'm kind of jealous of his response. I don't think I would have been my response would have been quite as good. He said, "Well, is it really necessary to tell her that if you spend money on things, you'll end up with the things and not the money?"
This is perhaps my favorite line out of the entire chapter is when most people say they want to be a millionaire, what they actually mean is I'd like to spend $1 million.
Yeah.
And that is literally the opposite of being a millionaire.
So this is a good time to kind of delineate between what it means to be rich or have things and what it means to be wealthy. And the way Morgan defines wealth in this book, and I think is the appropriate definition, is wealth is the financial assets that you cannot see or have not been converted into stuff. So no matter where you keep your money, whether that's just as simply in your checking account or even under your mattress, or in brokerage accounts or retirement accounts or whatever it may be, wherever you keep your money, that is your wealth. Now that could also be equity in a house, right? Mm-hmm. Home that you actually own, a physical asset or farmland or something like that. But it's the assets that have not been converted into stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
That's what wealth is.
So as opposed to rich, and the way he describes rich is a current income. So going back to the example of Roger, so someone driving $100,000 car likely is going to have a reasonable income to be able to even borrow the money to drive that car.
Yeah.
Right?
So the point he's saying there is like, it's not, you got to assume that they at least have some sort of good job or something to even if they took it out all on loan, just to get that loan, you've got to have some sort of like meaningful income to be able to take that loan out on a car like a Porsche. But that's the definition of rich.
Yep. So, and he says, it's not hard to spot rich people. They often go out of their way to make themselves known.
Yeah, exactly. Wealth is hidden. It's hard to tell if somebody is wealthy. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that book, Millionaire Next Door. Now this stat is old, and I don't know if this is still true, Matt, but I remember when I got into this industry and was kind of, coming to the understanding of this delineation between what it means to be rich and what it means to be wealthy. There was a study done at that time that the most common vehicle driven by millionaires, which did mean a little bit more when I got into this industry 18 years ago, was a Ford F-150.
There's another one. Well,
another one. What?
There's another car. There's two different ones. So go on with yours. I'll tell you what the other one is.
Well, no, let's go now.
The other one was a Toyota Avalon.
An Avalon?
Yeah. Not even like a Corolla.
Well, the Avalon's the nice one.
It's a bigger one, right?
Yeah, it's the Camry on steroids. Yeah, all the bells and whistles.
So I heard that there was two. There was the F-150 and then there was the Toyota Avalon, which I thought was a strange car.
Yeah, so it's those people that and we talked about this actually at a previous episode of our podcast where we were going through one of the chapters of Psychology of Money, and Morgan brought up the story of, I think he was the high school janitor, if I remember correctly. Ronald Reed, yes. And through his whole life, because he's a high school janitor, everybody just thought he was poor, essentially, or maybe not poor, but definitely like a lower class, because high school janitor didn't live in a nice house. He had the same house for his whole life, like never spent any money. And lo and behold, he dies and he's got what was it, like $8 million or something?
$7 or $8 million, I believe. Yeah.
Just a ton of money. So actually really wealthy. And so the point Morgan's trying to make, again, just for emphasis, is what you can't see wealth,
right?
You have no idea if somebody's wealthy, unless, of course, they're running around with their brokerage statements and their checking account balances and things of that. But I don't know about you, Matt. I've been in this financial services industry for a long time. I've never seen that.
I don't think you want to either. I don't know. You'd want to hang out.
It's funny because think about the psychology that the people that tend to save a bunch into, whether it's a 401k or just a regular savings account or what have you, don't feel the need to show it off. They're not the type of people that are going to be like, hey, I got $1 million 401k. But rich people take it and they do show it off through their clothes, through their car, through their house, through their, just these sorts of things.
I'm sorry. I can't stop laughing just picturing that playing out.
The person with their statements. Like this guy's got his Porsche and he's like, pull it up and they're like, look how awesome my Porsche is. You're like, oh yeah, look at my 401k.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So he talks about how Ronald Reed was actually no one's financial hero while he was alive.
Yeah.
But after his passing, when that became known, he did become the financial role model for a lot of people. But because it was all hidden, it's very, very challenging for us to make that connection.
So I think here's my takeaway. And if you have your own, feel free to add to this. But when you think about this distinction, because it's a pretty short chapter, it's actually only 4 pages in the book. But it's a really important point to make, is generally speaking, when you think about the psychology of money and the whole point of this book in general, one of the things he says here is that people are good at learning by when they imitation. I literally could not get that word out of my mouth. Like it just wanted to, it was intimidation for like 3 seconds. I was like, that's not the right word. Imitation. Yeah. They learn by imitation. We learn by watching and seeing and doing and these sorts of things. And because wealth is so hidden, it's really hard to imitate because you can't see it. And so from a financial advisor's perspective, I think the point that I want everybody to take away from this episode is not to compare yourself to other people.
Right.
Because if you're trying to be like your rich friends, if you're trying to get wealthy by being like your rich friends, you're never going to be wealthy, because as we talked about before, the definition of wealth is basically living below your means, not spending the money, not taking your money and turning it into something, but actually keeping the money.
Yep. I was going to land at the same spot. I was going to actually share a quote, just the comparison is the thief of joy. And that's a perfect example of that in action.
Do you know where that quote's from? Who said that?
I do not.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah. Do you know that?
I don't.
Okay.
I was just curious if you did.
I use it a lot, so I probably should.
Look it up. So that said, I think this is actually one of the hardest jobs as a financial advisor, is helping people understand this concept, because it's not as fun, right? Having success that's hidden is never as fun. In fact, there's that saying that whatever gets celebrated gets repeated.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you hear, so they always tell you as like a leader, you're supposed to celebrate wins with people. But because wealth is hidden, it never really gets celebrated.
Right.
And so we, as financial advisors, do have an opportunity to try to celebrate with people. And I don't know about you and your conversations with the families that we serve, currently or in the past, but I do try to meaningfully tell people, like, or celebrate with them, like, hey, you've done some really good things here. Here's what you, because they haven't heard that.
Right.
Right. Because again, they're not running around with their 401k statements and showing them off to people so that people can be like, wow, you really have succeeded in life based on that 401k statement, unlike the red Porsche that pulls up to the restaurant. So it is a really hard thing to do. It's harder to get started than anything. Right. Because you have to develop that new habit of living below your means, and then not getting that praise from other people that we all desire.
Yes.
Is that it? Are you going to?
That is it.
I nailed it.
You nailed it. No, comparison is the thief of joy. It is, that has been a helpful companion, I guess, personally for me. Just when you do see outward success, there's also a Warren Buffett, which ironically enough, an extremely wealthy person.
Mm-hmm.
He talks a lot about an internal scorecard versus an external scorecard. I think that's also a helpful tool, and also fits along with this, is focusing on the internal scorecard. So what are the wins that are personal to that person, that perhaps they don't care what others think about it quite as much.
Yeah.
And that's always been something that's really helpful as well.
So I'll wrap it up by just reading how he ends the chapter, because I think it's a great way to end. He says, the world is filled with people who look modest but are actually wealthy, and people who look rich who live at the razor's edge of insolvency. Keep this in mind when quickly judging others' successes and setting your own goals. Great way to end it. And as we move on, the next chapter that we're going to discuss, not necessarily the next episode of our podcast, but the next time we come back, again, they do kind of play on each other a little bit. The next chapters on saving money. So if you're going to try to be wealthy, you have to live below your means. You have to have these hidden assets. It's the money you have not yet spent. And so that it's a great segue into chapter 10, which will be coming up at some point here in the future, called Save Money. The only factor you can control generates one of the only things that matters. How wonderful. With that said, thanks for joining us again for this episode of Every Day is Saturday. Maybe one of these episodes we'll figure out why Matt switched from sauerkraut to base jumping, but we'll leave it there for now. If you're new to our podcast, we're glad that you found us. We hope that you stay with us. We would love if you would subscribe to our podcast, share our podcast with others. And if you want to get a hold of us or learn more about Fiat, you can always go to our website. All of our contact information is there about who we are, how we help families, and a bunch more education beyond just our podcast. The website is Fiat, FIATWM.com, fiatwm.com. Thanks for joining us for this episode, and we will see all of you next Saturday.